check out Cajun Lights, your complete dog hunting outfitter. Tracking equipment, leashes, collars, dog supplies, and much, much more. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. And don't forget their outstanding lineup of lights. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. Elite nutrition products are the hottest thing on the market right now for dog and horse owners. And Houndsman XP is a dealer. You can find all their products on our website at houndsmanxp.com. Over the past 5 years, you've tuned into this podcast, and I don't take it lightly. We have built a mutual trust. And when I recommend a product, it's because I believe in it, I use it, and I'm given my seal of approval for that. I'm putting my name on that. And with Elite Nutrition products, I do trust it. I do use it. I've seen great results with their essential dogs, their pre and probiotics, their tick-borne disease treatment. It's all natural. It's a great alternative to pharmaceuticals when used appropriately. If you expect extreme performance, you need Elite Nutrition. Available from houndsmanxp.com.
He lost his red tail about 2 weeks before the national meet, which he was planning on going to. And so on my way to work, I would pass by where he lost the bird. And just as luck would have it, I drove by an area where he lost the bird. And in a cemetery, I noticed a red-tailed hawk. So I stopped and honked my horn to see if the bird would fly, waved my arms and that sort of thing. The bird wouldn't budge. It was probably 150 yards away. Unfortunately, I had to climb over a chain link fence, and I didn't have anything to get the bird with except a pair of binoculars, which I thought maybe I could use as a lure. Well, lo and behold, I swung that lure, the binoculars, and tossed it onto the ground, and that red tail came right out of the tree and took the binoculars.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. And this episode is the last episode that I had recorded previously in reserve for a seemingly good time to go ahead and publish it. And being as I am close to episode 200, that next milestone for the podcast, I figured now would be as good time as any to come back to my home state of Indiana and publish this episode that I recorded seemingly forever ago with Doug Bensinger from Terre Haute. And the main purpose of this episode was to also kind of get some memories down and recorded of fellow falconer Don Garvin that passed, as well as to get Doug's story too, because he's been a falconer in the state for a very long time, and it's just as important to me to try and get as many of the older generation falconers recorded in my home state as it is pretty much everywhere else. So that being said, we're just going to jump right into this episode with Doug Bensinger, and next episode is going to be a really nice long one and a really important episode that I'm really happy to present for my next milestone of 200. So I hope you join us next week for that and enjoy. Here we go. I appreciate you doing this, and I'm glad we were able to finally make this happen. I know we've been talking about it since the season pretty much, but I've been working up here in Terre Haute pretty much on contract since the beginning of January, and at least we found times to get a chance to hunt together a couple times at least, if nothing else. But like I said, I mean, I'm glad that we finally were able to figure out a time to connect and have a good talk, and just kind of shoot the breeze for a bit. So I appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah. Well, I know you said that you've pretty much been in like this area for the majority of your life, right?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Terre Haute.
Yeah. And as far as, your profession and stuff, I know you said that, for a really long time you were in law enforcement, correct?
38 years.
Yeah. And as far as, what exactly did you end up having to do? Anything specific with that, or?
Well, I was a detective for about 35 of those 38 years. Ran the drug task force for 10 years and worked in the prosecutor's office for about 15 years as a liaison officer.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm sure that there was probably quite a bit of stress, anxiety, and things that went along with that. I'm sure, right?
A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So my dad, he was in law enforcement as a detective and other roles for, better part of 40 years. So, I'm
you understand what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. You get the gist of it, and like I said, it's for a lot of people in positions like that, it's hard not to bring things home sometimes, so
you try not to.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, whenever you were younger, I mean, is that what you, whenever you're younger, is that what you knew that you kind of wanted to do, or?
No, not actually. My dad was a police officer, and he went on the police department in Terre Haute in 1959, and I always wanted to be a veterinarian. And I graduated from high school and went to Purdue for a short period of time. Decided I didn't want to pursue that field. Came back to Terre Haute and went to work for a machine tool rebuilding company who actually went on strike. And I had invested a lot of money in tools and that sort of thing to better my job. And then after going on strike, I still had those bills to pay. So I went on the police department, and the company that I went to work for actually was still on strike after I got done with 3 months of work at the academy and actually got sent there on the strike line as a police officer. And I just had to tell my superintendent that I couldn't go there anymore, and they understood.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's it's always interesting hearing how, different people kind of traverse, different aspects of careers and life. Yeah. So, I mean, was there anything else that you kind of did in the interim or anything like that, or?
Well, I was always interested in falconry, and I got interested in falconry when I was 9 years old through Brother Edmund, who was at Gibault Christian School for Boys, which is located here in Terre Haute. And the way that happened was my dad was a city police officer who volunteered a lot of time at the boys club. And during the summer, we had a camp. And after the boys club camp was over, Gibault would bring their kids up there, and my dad would stay on as a counselor. And I met Brother Edmund, who was a falconer. And that's when I got my first introduction into falconry. And a year later, I sent $10 off to the DNR in Indianapolis and got my permit and took my first red tail.
And so, I mean, even though you've been doing this for a really long time, I mean, were you one of the guys then that was kind of starting in before the rules and regs, or were they already in place whenever you got your initial start then?
There were no rules or regulations. You could buy a bird through sporting magazines from different people in your neighborhood or wherever you could find one. Being 10 years old, there wasn't a lot I could do about trapping or even buying a bird unless my father helped me. But fortunately, he did, and I was able to acquire a red-tailed hawk, the first bird I got, and it was because, luckily for me, the guy that lived next door was a tree trimmer. And my grandparents owned some property in the country where I found a red-tailed hawk nest. and he agreed to climb the nest. And unfortunately for me, took a red-tail IS hen that was just a battle warrior. She was incredibly aggressive. I flew her in the neighborhood. Luckily, no one lost an eye. And, of course, being 10 years old, you couldn't drive. And I lived in a neighborhood that was very dilapidated, low income, a lot of vacant lots, with rabbits living underneath foundations of houses and that sort of thing. And I spent probably 2 years hunting just neighborhood vacant houses and yards in my neighborhood.
Well, I mean, you at least found a way to make it work. I mean, for a 10-year-old, that's a tall order, especially not having any guidance.
Well, yeah, the only guidance I got was from a book, Falconry for You by Henry Evans. And I read that book from cover to cover for 2 or 3 years and never killed a single thing except a cat. And when she killed the cat, I nearly got caught by the owner of the cat. And I just was able to persuade the owner of the cat to stay away because my bird was vicious and I couldn't control it. But it all worked out in the end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all tend to have run-ins with, ferals and things like that. And unfortunately, there are incidents like that happen over time. But if you're able to smooth things over and make it right or whatever the case is, then that's pretty much all you can do.
I remember the first bird that I caught a rabbit with was a bird that I purchased from a magazine. That bird caught a rabbit off my fist. I still remember it today. He caught it on the property owned by Ed Pease, who was a state representative for the state of Indiana. And my dad was with me. And it was the greatest thing ever happened to me. And even though I was sold on falconry from the beginning, that really welded my pursuit of the sport.
Yeah, and so pretty much you started when you were 10 then, and it was pretty much a solid part of your life from then on at that point, or?
It was, yeah. I flew red-tailed hawks when it was so cold that I would dip my food in egg yolk, and when I put it on my glove to call the bird back, it would be frozen before the bird got there. Even when I was in high school, I pursued the sport, and because I was active in athletics, a lot of times I didn't get home until after dark. But I still continued to fly my red tails after dark. There wasn't a problem. They don't hunt at night, but it's not that they aren't capable of it. They are.
Well, and I mean, these are all things that you just kind of developed over time and were, pretty much just self-taught, aside from the book, though, right? I mean, there wasn't anybody else that was kind of helping you along the way with it?
No. I got my permit from the DNR in 1965. I was 10 years old. And the only assistance I had was from Don Garvin, who my dad happened to locate because he was a police officer, and during his tour of duty, he noticed a red tail tied in the backyard of a house. And that's how I met Don Garvin. And Don, like a lot of falconers back then, wanted you to prove your stuff before they would help you a lot. And of course, I continued to strive in the sport and ended up going to probably one of the first falconry meets in Indiana, which was at Full Moon Lake, and then at Bob Bottomley's home later. I don't know if it was that year or the next year, but I continued to strive in the sport, and you got to remember that back then you didn't have cell phones, and being 12 or 13 years old at that time, 3 miles south of where I lived was like, you might as well be 1,000 miles away. But Don continued his interest in me, and we became good friends and ended up doing a lot of trapping and hunting together.
Since he was already kind of an established career as a police officer and stuff at that point also, that means he was a decent amount older than you, when you were, there was obviously kind of a little bit of an older degree of mentorship, that happened with that relationship, right? The more you got to know him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a lot for someone that's, older, and to take on a kid, basically. It can be a big ask,
Right. It was.
Yeah. Well, and as far as, your, progression and everything with, how long, so it took you a while to get your license and everything else. Did you mainly just continue to try and make things work here locally, during that time? Or, was it, kind of a situation where you eventually were able to, were you able to find other people to help you get around and hunt with and stuff? Or
actually, no. I spent almost all of my time hunting by myself. Mm-hmm. There were no other falconers in Terre Haute that I knew of course. That's a time when communications with other people wasn't as it is today. Mm-hmm. And my experiences with falconry were really just based on the book. I had a lot of help from Don. The guy who introduced me to falconry, Brother Edmund from Gibault, was just a week's worth of introduction into the sport. And then when I met Don, that gave me a foothold onto the sport. But as I said earlier, it's not like it is today. He might as well have been in Miami and me in Indiana. It really was that distant. I spent my time trying to do the best I could, enjoying the sport, getting out with the birds. Even though I didn't catch anything, it was still one of the greatest things I could do, because a bird I controlled was 50 feet high up in a tree and trying to catch a rabbit that was trying to get underneath of a demolished house. Mm-hmm. That was my introduction to falconry for 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. And when I went into junior high and high school, I continued to fly the birds, even though I wasn't successful. I didn't kill a lot of game. And I had a bird that was dangerous. She nearly ripped my left ear off at one point in my career. But then, I bought this Tiercel Redtail from Eddie Morgan in Murray, Kentucky, who sent the bird to me in a orange crate that bird didn't have a single feather that wasn't broken. But I took it and I cared for it, took it through the molt, got it all feathered back in, and that's the bird that I caught my first rabbit with.
Well, and as an experience with, as a super young falconer, and the only birds that you start off with are two red tails, one of which was an imprint. Yeah, I mean, hats off to you for, sticking with it and not just getting completely and totally scared away by the aggression issues and everything. I mean, that's a lot for a 10-year-old to take on, man.
Well, I guess when you don't understand that the aggression's caused by taking the IS, maybe it helps you overlook that problem. I did notice a big difference in the Tiercel, but he was gentle and he just seemed to work with me throughout the year, and we had a great relationship.
Well, if you don't know, it's like I said, for guys like me who weren't around that long ago, it's kind of hard to imagine how things were when there weren't any rules and regulations, and things were completely different. I couldn't imagine being a kid that young and learning like that. But as you said, if you don't know any better, then, you don't have really much of a frame of reference for anybody to tell you what supposedly, is a better way to do something or not, then I can understand where that would be an interesting way of learning and getting into everything. But what other birds and when do you feel like, what age was it that you feel like you started really kind of having true, quote unquote, success consistently?
Well, probably by the time I was 19 or 20, I started becoming more successful. I understood a lot more about the sport. I grew up hunting and fishing, and so I kind of understood wildlife a little bit. I just didn't understand how to make this bird do what I wanted it to do. It knew what it wanted it to do, and I was trying to change that program, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to explain it.
You just weren't really sure yet how to develop the relationship with the bird. Yeah.
And even at that point, you still had very little contact with people. Don Garvin was a good person to help guide me through what was going on, but also Don Anderson. And those of you who don't know who he is, he's one of the first breeders of eagles in the United States. And I met him at a very young age. And at that point, he had 2 golden eagles, a goshawk, and a prairie falcon. And he was able to successfully breed the eagles. And what I found out later was that when you spread yourself so thin with all those birds, your success rate is not so great. Even though he was a great falconer, he built his falconry on a different field than we do today. We don't have, at that point, we didn't have telemetry, and we didn't have a lot of the insights that we do have now on imprint birds, about how that causes problems with their characterizations with us, their relationships with people. But his golden eagles imprinted so much to him, and I'm not sure, in the early 70s or late 60s whether we understood what that meant, but he was able to hatch eagles, and unfortunately the federal government took them from him. But he was a great falconer, and I don't know what else to say about that situation.
I enjoy talking to, a lot of you all, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast several different times. Like I said, I enjoy talking to you all to get a different perspective, because things were so different, back then. And, now everything's kind of already been set in stone, with the sponsorship aspect of things. And, it's that system has been in place for so long. That's just kind of how we all know it now. But, to hear how things were before all that was really in place, like I said, it's always interesting, because everybody gets introduced to things in different ways and kind of learns on their own in completely different ways, because there wasn't a system, in place.
There wasn't. I've always enjoyed the sport of falconry, even since I was, like I said, 9-10 years old, and I've always pursued the sport. I've not always done things the right way. I've always done things the way I thought were right, but science and studies have shown that maybe some of the things we do are wrong. But I've always enjoyed it. I think it's a sport that requires so much time. Beagle dogs, guys who hunt rabbits, we all know how that goes. They tie their dogs up, and in the fall they turn them loose and chase rabbits, and we just can't do that in falconry. We have more respect for the animals, but there's a small fee to keep a dog, but what there requires to keep a bird is so much more. And not that that's bad. It just sometimes I think it forces people out of the sport that maybe would be good contributors to falconry.
Sure. Well, and as it's been stated millions of times before, I mean, it's not for everybody, and it'll never be for everybody just because of those requirements. But I mean, like, around what time was it that the state club was formed? I mean, I've always heard kind of some historical, stuff about, the forming of our state club here in Indiana. But like my understanding is you're pretty much like one of, or the, oldest remaining pretty much founding member of that, right?
In 1965, when I got my falconry permit, and all that entailed was sending $10 to the DNR in Indianapolis, is when I began my pursuit of falconry. Then in 1969, I think, is when maybe the Indiana Falconers Association club actually began. And I think the first meet was held at Don Garvin's Full Moon Lake cabin in Clay City. And then past that, in the early 70s, I worked for the Humane Society in Terre Haute with a guy named Jerry Riley, who was a member of the Indiana Falconers Association at that time. And we went to a meet at the Bottomley's house. I was so young, I couldn't drive, of course, and I rode with him. And I remember being at the Bottomleys, and Don Anderson was there with a prairie falcon, and there were several other falconers there with red tails and goshawks. And to be honest with you, I can't remember a lot more about that situation other than I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I was just a kid.
Right. Yeah, so you were around then, but you weren't one of the guys that initially helped form it. You're just like one of the older remaining members, per se, then.
Oh, yeah. I was just a kid.
Yeah.
I was just a kid, maybe 13, 14, 15 years old.
I mean, as far as like just the progression and the evolution of the club, though, I mean, as you stayed involved and, as you were kind of growing up in the midst of all those changes and everything, though, I mean, what kind of, changes can you remember there being, like some of the big things that took place like over time that were, kind of integral with the evolution of falconry in the state?
In, I think it was 1977, the DNR required falconers to get permits, and they started regulating all kind of birds of prey and that sort of thing. And at that point, I was still just a kid, mm-hmm. and trying to fulfill all the requirements from the DNR to allow me to pursue the sport. So, to be honest with you, that was probably about the time that I went into high school or junior high school. And during those years, I was very busy I played athletics. I was busy with basketball and baseball and football and falconry. And falconry kind of took a back seat to a lot of those things. And of course, girls came into the picture about that time as well. So it kind of fuzzies the memories about how things went.
I gotcha. Well, I mean, like I said, though, I mean, over time, you pretty much stayed involved, though, as a member and everything like that during that whole time, though, right? I mean, even though you were still kind of preoccupied with other things, or?
I did. Yeah, I did. I wasn't as active as I should have been looking back in years, but, there are things when you're in high school, girls and careers and that sort of thing seem to take center stage versus flying a bird. But I always kept the bird. I may not have been as involved as I should have, but I also think that a lot of times kids at that age should maybe walk away from the sport for a little bit, because what it requires and what life requires. Do I want to spend the prom night with a bird, or do I want to spend my prom night with a girl? Which my graduation prom from high school, I spent in the field taking a red-tailed hawk from a nest instead of spending the time with my friends at a high school.
Everybody's head's in different places, even when they're kids and throughout their life and stuff. I mean, is it something that you necessarily, I mean, the time that you do that, I mean, it's a good sentiment to have, as far as recommending that, especially if you're young and into this, might be, it might be nice to kind of keep things into perspective. But I mean, do you regret like spending that time at all, or is it something that looking back you kind of wish that maybe you would have prioritized his normal life stuff a little bit more?
I should have prioritized my life. I should have spent more time with my high school friends instead of with the birds. But I don't know. It's just,
Yeah.
it's in me to do that. And I sacrificed probably a lot of enjoyment with my friends to pursue the sport of falconry.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight's always 2020, as they say. But, well, I mean, as far as, I mean, the different species that you've flown, I mean, I know that you've always kind of been infatuated some with accipiters and you know, I mean, what would you say has been your favorite species to fly? I mean, has it always been, you know, kind of in that accipiter family, like with goshawks and
It
stuff?
has been.
Yeah.
Probably the most pleasurable bird I've flown is a goshawk. I fly sharp-shinned hawks, and I've got an 8-year-old sharp-shinned now and an 8-year-old goshawk, and they're both great hunters. We've had great times together. My Sharpie is probably, unfortunately, probably one of the oldest birds that a lot of guys, a lot of them don't make it to that age in captivity for some reason. But anyway, I've been fortunate. She's a great hunter. Station Nova flew her at the last meet here in February and killed a starling with her, and she's just a great bird. And the goshawk, a little more temperamental. I'm not as apt to just give her out to somebody to fly for an afternoon at the February falconry meet, but my sharp shins, she's very well adjusted and has a great time. She doesn't care who's flying her. She's out there for the sport, and she's very successful.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to deal with a temperamental Sharpie than it is a temperamental goshawk, I would say.
And a lot less to lose, like an eye.
Exactly. Well, I mean, before we, you know, kind of, you know, go on a different ways today and stuff. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this talk with you also is, you know, you've already referenced, you know, Don a few times, and you know, as far as just, you know, your overall experience with him, and you know, part of the reason I wanted to have this talk is because, you know, I know that he did mean quite a bit to, you know, the club and a lot of members, you know, in the state, in the falconry community and stuff. But I wanted to, you know, just kind of get some, you know, a couple of your favorite memories or stories with Don, if you wouldn't mind sharing them, and you know, whichever ones you think would be most appropriate to share, I guess, you know. But you know, I mean, like I said, I kind of wanted to go over that some, since we just lost him, you know, within this past year, and
Right.
you know,
Don was a great falconer. He was introduced to falconry through Brother Edmund at Gibault. Basically, I think the same way I was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember exactly. It's been so many years ago. But Don and I traveled a lot to different trapping sites, Duluth, Whitefish Point, places like that. And we trapped a lot of birds. We had a lot of fun. He was kind of a falconer that took things kind of on his own. He wasn't serious about killing a lot of game. That wasn't his program. He just wanted to spend a lot of time with the birds and watch them do what they do in the wild. His latter years, he spent hunting squirrels on the golf course right next to it, right outside his door. And so I do remember an instance where he lost his bird. I don't remember which NAFA meet it was, but he lost his red tail about 2 weeks before the national meet, which he was planning on going to. And so on my way to work, I would pass by where he lost the bird. And just as luck would have it, I drove by an area where he lost the bird, and in a cemetery, I noticed a red-tailed hawk. So I stopped and honked my horn to see if the bird would fly, and waved my arms and that sort of thing. The bird wouldn't budge. It was probably 150 yards away. Unfortunately, I had to climb over a chain link fence, and I didn't have anything to get the bird with except a pair of binoculars, which I thought maybe I could use as a lure. Well, lo and behold, I swung that lure, the binoculars, and tossed it onto the ground, and that red tail came right out of the tree and took the binoculars. Unfortunately, as I made into the red tail, it decided to fly off with my binoculars. And luckily, it only flew a couple of 100 yards and then went to the ground again with the binoculars. So at this point, I got down and really snuck into the bird quietly and as low as I possibly could. And I was able to get a hold of the bird and the binoculars and carry the bird back and climb over the fence and get in my car. And I knew where Don was having breakfast. So I took the bird there and I had it bound up and I put it underneath my coat. And I walked into the restaurant where he was sitting, and I opened up my coat and exposed that red tail. And he almost cried because he was leaving the next day for the national meet, and he didn't want to go without a bird. And luckily for me, I was able to catch it and give it back to him, and he was able to go to the meet with the bird.
That's hilarious. Yeah,
it's insane.
It's funny, some of these stories that I hear, especially some of the older guys that had to be really ingenuitive at times and how they got birds back and different. Because like you said, I mean, back in the day, there's a lot of guys like yourself that were indoctrinated into all this without the fancy stuff, like the telemetries and things of the world.
Right.
And yeah, it's funny, how things work out sometimes with that.
Another story I'll tell you real quick. It was in February. It was very cold, rainy, and the ice was froze on everything. And Don's property was edged by a railroad track, and there was a train that had stopped there along the railroad track, and his bird had caught a squirrel and was up in a tree, maybe 50 or 60 feet up in a tree, and it was 9:00 at night in February. It's dark and freezing cold. And Don called me and wanted to know if I'd come down and help him get his bird back. Well, I got down there, and he was about 15 feet in the air on the side of a ice-covered boxcar. And at this point, he was probably 65 or 70 years old, which was very dangerous for him to be up there. And he was trying to get up as close as he could to his hawk and get it to come down. And I convinced him to get down off the boxcar before he got killed. And he took his lure. I told him, put your lure out on the railroad track and I'll shine my light on it, and we'll trigger your bird to come down to the lure. And he didn't think that would work. But within about 5 minutes, that bird was down on the lure. He had his bird back. And nobody had any broken bones. And I was very thankful that it all worked out the way it did.
Yeah, so if he would have just had a flashlight on him, he could have avoided, the near-death experience of climbing 15 feet on ice over boxcar.
Literally, it was a near-death situation. Had he fallen at his age onto the railroad tracks, he probably wouldn't have recovered.
Just the things that we go through, just in dealing with all this stuff. We all have just those moments that we just think about afterwards, just like, why am I even still doing this sometimes? It's just,
You're right.
It's all worth it, man. But, well, and real quick too, I want to get one of your really more memorable, personal hunting memories, or, another memory about a particular bird that you flew, or, what's one of the more memorable experiences that you think you've had in your personal falconry?
Well, it's got to be my first catch. It was in 1974, and I was on property owned by the state representative Ed Pease, and it was a tiercel redtail I was hunting with that I had purchased from Eddie Morgan, and it was in the second season, and we were walking, my dad and I, who really didn't have a lot of faith in falconry. He was a hunter. He hunted anything that you could think about, but he wasn't sold on falconry. But we went into this orchard, and I was hunting the redtail out of lack of knowledge, off my fist, and a rabbit broke, and the tiercel took in pursuit and caught the rabbit, and that was one of the most memorable experiences of my life in falconry. I'll never forget it.
Well, good deal. Appreciate you taking part of an afternoon out and talking with me about some of this stuff, and appreciate you sharing a couple of your more fond memories with Don, and at least to me, it's important that there's just certain people and certain experiences that aren't forgotten, and appreciate you sharing that.
No problem.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, and before we go, I've been doing this with a lot of falconers, but I want to get what you think would be your best piece of advice, or any particular kind of sentiment that you think would be worth sharing with either current or prospective falconers, or anybody, that's, like I said, that's either involved in or thinking about getting the sport, and then we'll call this good.
Well, first of all, if you're going to become a falconer, you have to realize that it's going to take almost a total devotion. I don't want to discourage anybody from becoming a falconer, and you can do it without total devotion after several years of experience. But to begin with, you need to understand that it's going to take all that you have to listen and understand and learn what is going on with the birds, and how to handle them, eyes or passage, whatever you decide to do. And they're all different. Flying passage birds is almost a completely different sport than flying eyas birds. It's just, you have to understand the sport and hopefully you have a good sponsor who can guide you in the right direction.
Perfect. Well, like I said, Doug, thank you again for taking the time, and I'll let you get back to your day and let your poor guard dog back out of the crate, and so he quits being restless, and like I said, thank you again, and hopefully, maybe if you're going to be there, I'll see you. If not before then, at the summer picnic and all that.
I'll be there.
Perfect. All right, bud. Well, like I said, thanks again, and we'll talk again soon.
You're welcome.